KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Misty Jordan with BIN News Now. In April, Black Senator Cory Booker pulled an all-nighter and gave a 25-hour Senate speech. It took a bit of a toll on his body.
And it gave me nothing on a sleep score because my heart rate was pretty damn high after about 4 or 5 hours, a little bit high. That's concerning. So there are definitely some physical things. I'm feeling it now.
The record-breaking remarks earned more than 350 million likes on TikTok. Now, Cory Booker is turning that speech into a book called Stand. It's set to be released November 11th of this year. President Trump has a warning for Elon Musk. If the tech billionaire begins funding Democrats, there will be, quote, serious consequences, end quote. And actor and movie producer Keenen Ivory Wayans is 67 years old today. Get BIN News now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Yeah. Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see. Oh, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Oh, what's going on? Right
on. I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Glad to have you tuned in with us today for this special program. For the next 3 hours, I will be here along with many of my colleagues, just a plethora of special guests who will join us to talk about what has been happening in L.A. the last 48 hours. If I receive one call, I receive more calls than I can count from people all across the country, indeed around the world, asking me what is happening in Los Angeles. Let's jump right in. We got, again, so many guests over the next 3 hours. I don't want to waste any time. Pleased to be joined right now, as I will be for the rest of these 3 hours, by my colleagues, Dominique DePrima, host of First Things First, weekday mornings, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Dominique, how are you today?
Good morning, Tavis. I'm blessed. Glad to be here, even in the chaos.
Yeah, good to see you. And he hosts his program. So I got morning drive and afternoon drive here. I've never done this before, actually. Morning drive with Dominique, afternoon drive with Nicolai Corte of More Perfect Union. Dr. Corte, how are you today, sir?
I'm as well as can be, but encouraged being with the two of you.
I feel the same way. We need each other now more than ever. And this is really, in some ways, embarrassing, humiliating. I can go on and on and on. But to your mind, Dominique, for starters, what have you seen happen over the last couple of days in this city?
Well, what you have is, part of a pattern we're seeing across the country, which is ICE, Immigration's Custom Enforcement, and Homeland Security deploying masked law enforcement agents to various sites to arrest immigrants, migrants, they'll say illegal aliens. Mm-hmm. And we saw them descend on Los Angeles on Friday at a number of different sites, and including schools and Home Depot locations. And there was a huge pushback from the community. We've had protests. We've had individual citizens trying to block ICE agents or Homeland Security or whatever they are. We don't always know, because many times they are not identifying themselves and are masked. And so as those arrests have ramped up, we had 44 arrested on Friday, and then a number arrested yesterday. I think the number is at 115, 118. We're not getting super clear numbers. We've seen a lot of resistance from LA elected officials, California state elected officials, including the governor, the mayor of Paramount, of course, where we saw the biggest clash around that Home Depot store, and the mayor of Los Angeles as well. And this has continued to escalate Saturday as we've seen pushback from Washington, and the National Guard now being deployed in Los Angeles. 2,000 guards, people is what we're hearing. And although it's not clear exactly where they're being deployed or how they're being utilized, this is something that the governor has decried, and as well as other elected officials, some of whom we'll hear from today. But there was a tweet from the president saying that if the mayor and the governor cannot control the state and the city of Los Angeles, they will take over, which is unconstitutional as far as my interpretation, but I'll be interested to hear from some of our expert guests.
Even more than the president saying they'll take over, Tom Homan, the president's immigration czar, went further than that and said if Gavin Newsom, the governor, and Karen Bass, the mayor, don't cooperate, they will be arrested. I mean, it was arresting to read a government official say that we will arrest the governor of California and the mayor of Los Angeles for harboring illegals. So this is just beyond the pale in so many ways. I want to read right quick the official White House statement. Dominique referenced what the president had to say. I quote from the president's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. Where is the quote? I just had it and lost it just that fast. Here it is. In recent days, violent mobs have attacked ICE officers and federal law enforcement agents carrying out basic deportation operations in Los Angeles, California. These operations are essential to halting and reversing the invasion of illegal criminals into the United States. In the wake of this violence, California's feckless Democratic leaders have completely abdicated their responsibility to protect citizens. That is why President Trump has signed a presidential memorandum deploying 2,000 National Guardsmen to address the lawlessness that has been allowed to fester. The Trump administration has a zero-tolerance policy for criminal behavior and violence, especially when that violence is aimed at law enforcement officers trying to do their jobs. These criminals will be arrested and swiftly brought to justice. The commander-in-chief will ensure the laws of the United States are executed fully and completely. Melina Abdullah, who is our colleague here at KBLA Talk 1580, of course, the founder of BLM Grassroots LA. Melina, you heard the statement. Are you buying that argument?
No, I'm not, because I was out there. I was out there on Friday. And who was lawless, who was violent, is the police, is the DHS folks, is the ICE folks, is also LAPD. LAPD is absolutely complicit with what's happening. On Friday, when we were out, there was a press conference followed by a march, and we were it was very mild, walking around the federal detention center, and as soon as we hit the block, there were young people, old people, babies in strollers. They started shooting off tear gas canisters at us. And so if you want to talk about what the violence is when masked agents feeling like an absolute Gestapo are going into elementary schools and pulling children and their parents out, when they're separating 2-year-olds from their families, when they're locking 9-year-olds up in basements of places that aren't even supposed to be detention centers. They are absolutely violent, and we need to think about what this is and act based on the federal government especially engaging in ways that we've never seen before. The only comparison I can think of is Nazi Germany.
Let me bring in Connie Rice, a regular contributor to my nationally syndicated program. Connie Rice, you heard the statement as well. Are you buying what the White House is selling?
Absolutely not. It's a pretext for Autocracy 202, which is to provoke and target a helpless minority and provoke them into violence with your violence, meaning state's violence. This is fascism. It's the power of the state to crush the population. And we're so far beyond normal. I don't see our politicians and our leaders, other than the folks you're talking to, understanding what frame we're in, Tavis.
Yeah.
This is a siege. It is a siege by overwhelming power that we can't fight militarily, but we haven't had time to organize the population for. When you have this kind of state-sponsored, hyper-violent, militarized, crushing force on a population, that population has to be able to resist in a way with overwhelming presence that is nonviolent, but we can't do that because the violence is overwhelming from the other side. So I think we've got to step back and get a very highly organized response. The problem is that if you study revolutions, when you're at this stage, it takes at least 20% of the population being in the streets. You know, the Doobie Brothers song, "Taking It to the Streets."
Oh yeah, no,
but we got to take it to the streets in a highly strategic way that we haven't had time to orchestrate. You know, when Reverend Lawson and Reverend King organized nationally the African American civil rights revolution with nonviolent resistance, nonviolent disruption, nonviolent disobedience. We had folks trained. We were prepared. We had an army that was across the country, but we had 3 years to prepare it. We don't have that right now.
Yeah.
But we do need to step back and understand all normalcy is out the window. And we've got to prepare for the fact that we are under siege and that the federal government has declared war on Los Angeles.
We're going to move swiftly through these 3 hours. All kinds of guests lined up. We're expecting a call from Mayor Karen Bass. At the bottom of the hour, at a quarter to the hour, the sheriff, Robert Luna, is calling in. At the top of our second hour, our city attorney, Hydee Feldstein Soto, is calling in. We're going to do this all 3 hours today. We're honored to be here at KBLA Talk 1580, talking to all the persons that we need to hear from today in this dark night in the history of Los Angeles. I'm joined in studio by my colleagues Dominique DePrima and Dr. Nicola Corte.
Connie Rice, good morning. I want to pick up where you left off. You began talking about how this is a pretext for autocracy. It seems to me that the very right to protest is being criminalized right before our very eyes. Talk to us about some of the moves that this administration has made thus far to basically make protest against government a criminal activity, and what guidance would you offer to protesters that are going to be out in the streets and at City Hall at 2 p.m. Today protesting against these ICE raids?
Great questions, great premises. What we've seen it for 9 years. You start by canceling dissent. You start by reversing objectively verifiable truth and fact. The death of truth, the death of fact, the death of history. You erase all of that. You undo all of the protection of civil rights laws, so you make suing to defend yourself actually impossible. Then you cancel the institutions that will stand up to you. Attack universities, attack the press, make you completely silence any radical, what they consider radical ideas in press. You take away their licenses. You silence them in every way. You take away their money, their voice, everything. Then you start using the crushing power of the state to take illegal actions that violate the Constitution. They're canceling the Constitution, snatching people off the street and sending them to prisons in El Salvador, taking 4-year-olds with cancer and taking them out of the country so they die. It's a death and destruction fascism. And when you're faced with that, it's hard to do this. It's very hard to do this because we haven't had time to prepare. But the one thing you can't do is give them what they need to actually ratchet up the force. Yet people have to respond. So it's a catch-22 at this point. But what people need to do, first of all, you've got to show out numbers. If you don't have the numbers, everybody just gets swept up. But who was the person who said they can't kill all of us? When you have 17 to 20% of the population in the streets, that can usually shut down a fascist, militarized, violent action by the government if they're willing. Let me put it this way: as long as the government isn't willing to kill everyone, as long as they're not at a slaughter mode. I don't think Washington is at that mode right now. So as long as we're not in that frame, mass demonstrations can have an effect at this point. And so the point about this afternoon, make it big, make it loud, make it sustained. Don't attack the cops. Make it filmed so that we have enough film to defend people in court. Get your video, get your eye organized. Make sure it's not just folks out there with their iPhones. Make sure you have videographers who can accurately capture, because what police and feds will do is they will change their body cameras. They will turn their body cameras off, and lawyers won't have the evidence to defend individuals. Get an army of lawyers at the site ready to defend, ready to get witness statements, ready to get people's numbers. This is, in other words, we've got to fortify and train ourselves for a long-term siege. I was writing a memo saying we need to cancel the Olympics because for immigrants and for poor people who are going to be moved out for the Olympics, this isn't going to be the LA Games. This is going to be Squid Games. This is going to be the Hunger Games, okay? And I was saying that under the guise of preparing for the Olympics, he could bring in tanks. It's legally okay for him to do it. He's not waiting. I miscalculated again. He's doing that now. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I put a pin in that. I want to come back to this point about the Olympics. We'll do that in a second. Dominique, you're going to say something now.
Well, I want to ask Dr. Melina Abdullah, because I've seen on social media, and I've even had some folks calling me saying this is not a black issue. This is Latinos,
Yes.
this is Asians,
Yeah.
this is not us. Why are black people out in these streets? And then you see a lot of protesters out with Mexican flags. And I kind of question that, too, because I'm saying, you know, we're still in the United States of America. We are protesting for our rights under the U.S. Constitution, not the Mexican Constitution. What do you say to those points, Dr. Abdullah?
One, this is our issue. This is our issue. Black people come from everywhere. Our beloved Pastor Q comes from St. Lucia, right? One of our leads, Michael, his family comes from Costa Rica. Megan Castillo's family comes from Belize. And we also have to remember that when they're coming into communities like Compton and Inglewood, where they were yesterday, they're not asking questions. They are rounding people up. There has never been, as Connie Rice put it, a siege where black people weren't the targets of the siege. So we might be feeling like they're coming for other people now, but they are coming for black people. And then lastly, I'll just lift up one of the things I love most about our people is that we fight for justice. And one of the most beautiful Instagram posts I saw during this moment was of a black male teacher. I think we probably shared it, Dominique, because Dominique and I send each other reels of a black male teacher who was crying and couldn't stop crying about the rounding up of children and children's parents. And he was talking about Latinos, and he was African American, because that's who we are as black people. We understand family separation. When we talk about chattel slavery, the first people to be separated were black people who descend from chattel slavery. And so this is absolutely our issue for many, many reasons, and we have to fight. I agree, it has to be all of us rising up and pushing back against fascism and fighting for our universal freedom.
It seems to me, Connie, that in some ways, and Adam Schiff made a comment similar to this yesterday, Senator Adam Schiff, that there's nothing that Donald Trump would like more than a violent confrontation with protesters to justify the unjustifiable, namely the invocation of the Insurrection Act or some other form of martial law. I love the advice you gave earlier of how people ought to handle themselves today when they show up at City Hall and beyond to protest. But again, my sense is that Adam Schiff is right about that. He's not the only one who suggested that there's nothing more that Donald Trump would love right now than a bloodbath in Los Angeles to justify him doing whatever he wants to do or plans to do anyway.
That's right. If it's almost like psyops. And I would just add to Dr. Abdullah's point, Don't forget, they just declared a Latino gang to be out of bounds so that they could snatch members of it. What if they declared Grape Street Crips to be out of bounds? Mm-hmm. And they start going into Jordan Downs and picking up anybody who's black who might look like they have a tattoo and send them to El Salvador. This is our fight because we, as African Americans, are the only ones who have ever known American totalitarianism, chattel slavery. And that fascism is a step toward that the totalitarianism. And if you think we're going to be okay under that, I've got some sad news for you. Back to the other point. When playing into their hands is people are upset, they're terrorized, they're traumatized, they're outraged. It's very, very hard to get a cold, hard eye on this and say, rule number one is you never give them what they need to kill you. Okay? If you've got the firepower to do warfare, then that's a different frame. But we're not in that frame. We don't have the tanks and the AK-47s. So we've got to have asymmetrical insurrection tactics. The asymmetrical power when you were the ones with the less power. That's what the nonviolent resistance, obstruction, that whole thing of, if you show up at this with candles and show but there's also a PR war, because if you show people shouting and angry, that plays into their hands too. I'm not suggesting that's unreasonable. Of course it's reasonable to be angry and traumatized and to express that anger. But strategically, I'd get up there with the calmest voice possible and say, we have had declining crime for 15 years. It is a lie that there is any kind of violence here, that we need anybody other than what we've had. We've been fine. We don't need the military. And it's just a pretext for you to exercise what you want, which is control, abrogation of our democracy, and the crushing of anybody who doesn't look like you.
I'm Tavis Smiley. I'm joined in this hour in studio by my colleagues Dominic DePrima, Dr. Nicolai Corte. We're joined on the phone to the bottom of the hour by our regular contributor, Connie Rice, and our colleague here at KBLA Talk 1580 and BLM Grassroots founder, Melina Abdullah, Dr. Melina Abdullah. We are pushing toward 9:30, bottom of the hour, Pacific time, where we're expecting a phone call from the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, Karen Bass. At a quarter to the hour, we expect to hear from the sheriff of L.A. County, Robert Luna. At the top of the next hour, we'll hear from Hydee Feldstein Soto, the city attorney. We're lining them up all 3 hours of today's program.
Dr. Abdullah, good morning. Newsweek is reporting on an unverified video from Channel 7 showing a helicopter landing in Paramount near a Department of Homeland Security office at around 5:45 p.m. Yesterday. It's reported that people were offloading boxes and boxes, dozens of boxes of ammunition and less lethal weaponry, tanks with flammable labels on the side of them. What do you make of this?
It's the violence. It's the violence that the state is carrying out against the people. The state is the one that's carrying out the violence. And I did a lot of soul searching over the last 2 days. I've been saying, fight them. And I absolutely hear Connie Rice about, how we have to frame things PR-wise. But I'm also thinking about these children. And I'm also realizing that I'm 52 years old and probably am the best equipped to physically fight people. But if they come for our children, we got to think about self-defense. When they come for our people, the mamas, we got to think about self-defense. They have declared war on the people. These boxes and boxes of ammunition, they call it less lethal, but we have to remember that Keenan Anderson was murdered by a taser, right? And so we don't know what will happen. I do know that there is absolute offensive violence that they are just deploying on people who are already there trying to be peaceful, trying to say we have a right to live and a right to exist. And the state is the one that's violent. I think that people always have a right to defend ourselves.
Melina, let me ask you. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of
No
Dominique
worries,
right quick.
no worries.
I want to ask you. I'm sorry, Dominique. I want to ask you right quick. I read a number of pieces. I'm sure you have as well, where the Trump people have long lamented the fact that not enough was done in Minnesota after the murder of George Floyd 5 years ago to put a lid on that, and this is their moment to show how they think that should have been handled, Melina.
Right. I know what they're thinking because they absolutely want to exact violence on us, and they are. They are exacting violence on us. The question is, one, will we stand up? And two, will we defend ourselves? I do believe that self-defense has a place, and I'm not going to condemn anyone around self-defense. Now, it needs to be strategic, but we do have to also think about how important self-defense is.
Yeah, I have a question for Attorney Connie Rice about these masks. How is it legal? How is it constitutional for law enforcement to take people into custody without saying what agency they're from or even showing their faces?
Because they've declared an emergency. It's a fake emergency. It's a pretext. It's an excuse. It's cover for unconstitutional, illegal mass action to terrorize and lay siege. So, but we have an administration in Washington that is lawless. I mean, he's a convicted criminal. When you elect criminals, and he's already told you that he had to terminate the Constitution. He told us what he was going to do, and people voted for him anyway. This is what termination of the Constitution looks like. So, Dominique, you and I are talking about a frame that we left a while ago. If this were a normal constitutional frame where the rule of law applied and you had the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments in operation and the 8th Amendment in operation, you could challenge the face mask. Face masks are the least of what we need to worry about. And don't worry about those Mexican flags. That's cat laser stuff. Yeah. Do not get distracted. That is not the signal. That's the noise. People are going to express themselves in the way they want to, but this is about all of us standing up against fascism and totalitarianism and the actual siege on people of color.
We're standing by for a call for L.A. Mayor Karen Bass here in moments. Connie, let me ask you right quick before the mayor calls us. Speaking of what's lawful and what's not lawful, I've read more than one article about whether or not Trump, as president, even had the authority to call in the National Guard. He did that over the protestation we know of. The mayor of L.A. And the governor of California threatened to arrest them. His immigration czar did if they got in the way. But what's your sense, what's your read of whether or not the president does in fact have the authority to call in the National Guard? I'm seeing all kind of opinions about that from various experts.
I'm not an expert in that, Tavis, but I do think there's a question as to whether he can call in National Guard from other states and deploy them in California when there's no emergency. When there's no emergency, it's like that Alien Enemies Act. Yeah. You can't just grab a statute and say, I'm going to use it. You have to actually satisfy the elements of that statute. I don't think they satisfy the elements of deploying any National Guard, be it California-based or other state-based. But guess what? The courts, by the time we get into court to challenge it,
it's too late.
These tanks are already on our streets.
Yeah.
I've got to ask you about the suspension of habeas corpus. Stephen Miller, the president's deputy chief of staff, who manages the immigration portfolio, just at the White House a few weeks ago, had talked about how the administration is looking into suspending habeas corpus. Connie, how alarmed should we be about the potential of that, and what does that mean, brass tacks, in terms of how we live and move in our communities?
Habeas corpus is one of the founding pillars of human freedom and individual rights. It means that when the state takes you and puts you in prison, you have the right to challenge the fact that they have your body in a cage, okay? It's have the body. That's what habeas corpus means. It is the right to challenge the king's power to put you in a cage, okay? Once that's gone, that's like taking the struts out of the house, okay? So, but to worry about that, when we're in this frame, we left habeas corpus about 2 frames ago. All right. When you're rounding up people illegally with pretexts that have no basis in objectively verifiable fact, reality on the ground. This is, my question isn't whether you're left or right. My question is whether you're reality-based and constitutional law-based. Remember, these folks, they make up their own reality. And so while we're arguing facts and law, they're weaving a myth and a delusion that justifies what they want to do.
Right, thus they can take David Huerta into custody, an SEI union leader, and he's still there until Monday. Smash his head on the concrete. It does feel like we've entered a different era.
That reminded me of, we all know this, Dominic DePrima happens to be the daughter of Diane DePrima, and the legendary Amir Baraka. Her brother Raz Baraka is the mayor of Newark, running for governor in the Garden State of New Jersey. When I saw that story about David Huerta being beat up by ICE at this raid here, I thought about your brother being arrested in New Jersey for, again, just engaging his constitutional duty.
For doing his job. And the other thing about that is that the White House actually lied on the press release and said he stormed the facility. He was there to greet the members of Congress who were inspecting that private prison, which was not permitted and not meeting the city regulations, similar to what we saw here in California, where we had some of our lawmakers try to inspect the ICE facility, and they were turned away. They were turned away from doing their job.
We have the mayor on the line. Melina, thank you for your insights. As always, we'll be checking with you throughout the week. This story's got legs, as they say, sadly. But thank you for your insights today, Melina. We appreciate you. Connie, thank you as well. We thank you for calling in and sharing your insights. Of course, Connie, a regular on my program. We'll be tapping in with her throughout the week as well. Mayor Bass, welcome back to KBLA. We say KBLA, as in Karen Bass, LA. Good to have you on the program. How are you today, Mayor?
I'm doing okay, Tavis. How are you?
If I complained, I'd be an ingrate. Wish I were talking to you under different circumstances. I'm joined by my colleagues.
I know.
Dominic DePrima is here with me. Nicordelai Corte is here with me. Let's jump right in and make the most of the 10 to 15 minutes we have with you. I know you're very, very busy. Let me just start with a broad question. Tell me what you know at this hour. How are things? Where are we? What's happening? Update us as you can, Mayor Bass.
Well, first of all, what's most important is that L.A. is peaceful. Nothing is happening here. But yet we have 200 National Guard, 100 of them deployed downtown at the Federal Building, 100 of them deployed in Westwood, where there never was anything that was going on, at the Federal Building on Wilshire Boulevard. And then there's 100 other soldiers that are deployed in the city of Paramount. So this is just a, completely unnecessary show of force. For no reason. The disruption that happened on the street last night, it was a little over 100 protesters. The LAPD can handle that, can handle the vandalism. So this move by the administration is completely unnecessary.
When you say unnecessary, let me just ask point blank why you think they would engage at such a level in such a way when it's unnecessary.
Well, first of all, the reason I say that is because there was no mass protest happening here. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was some vandalism and I'm only talking about the city of Los Angeles, okay, not the city of Paramount. So there were protests, there was vandalism. My point is that LAPD could handle this. Why are you sending in the military? It's an unnecessary show of force, and the only reason I could think that this is happening is to maybe teach us a lesson and maybe send a signal to other cities.
Mayor Karen Bass, you saw that my brother, the mayor of Newark, was arrested by ICE and held for a whole day. And when the president of the United States and his his border czar are threatening to arrest you and the governor and take over the city, how do you respond to that, seeing that that's already happened to a sitting mayor in our country recently?
Well, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I'll tell you, it's ironic considering what our city has been through, what our area has been through, coming on the anniversary of the wildfires for this to happen. And interestingly, one of the reasons why things have advanced in the wildfires is because of support from the administration, and now we have the exact opposite happening.
Good morning, Mayor Bass. Newsweek is reporting on an unverified video from Channel 7 showing a helicopter landing in Paramount near a Department of Homeland Security office about 5:45 p.m. On Saturday, they reportedly were offloading boxes and boxes, dozens of boxes of ammunition and less lethal weaponry, tanks with flammable labels on the side. What do you make of this, and what's your guidance to the Angelenos that will be showing up at City Hall this afternoon in protest to these raids?
Well, let me just say, first of all, that I did hear that a Black Hawk helicopter landed actually in Compton, but Compton and Paramount are right next to each other, and that they were unloading supplies. I do not know that they were ammunition. I do not know that they were less lethal. I don't know what it was that was in those boxes. I think it's important to make a distinction. But I do believe that all of this just sends a message. Can you imagine the way the people of Compton and Paramount felt when they saw a Black Hawk helicopter, which is very dramatic?
Yeah. Yeah, very, very dramatic. And in City Hall, at City Hall today, there are a number of folks that are planning on showing up in mass, protesting these National Guard that the president has sent to our city, protesting these ICE raids. What is your guidance to Angelenos that are looking to exercise their right at a time where we have an administration that seems to be criminalizing protest as we know it?
I would say, please exercise your First Amendment right peacefully. And I think that it is critical to say that, because if there is violence and if there is vandalism, we do not need to have federal troops, the National Guard, on our streets. And we should not give them an excuse to demobilize in our city in a even bigger way.
Mayor, we were talking about this earlier. We were talking earlier, Mayor, with Connie Rice about this and asking her opinion. I've seen a number of pieces written about this by a number of legal experts, whether or not the president had the authority to do what he has done. You mentioned there are a couple hundred National Guard troops already here. He promised 2,000. To your mind, we're talking to Hydee Feldstein Soto, city attorney, at the top of the next hour. But what's your sense of whether or not the president had the authority to do this in the first place?
Well, again, Tavis, I'm not a lawyer. Yeah. My understanding is that he can federalize the National Guard, and his letter to the governor said that. That's the extent that I am aware. But there are very specific rules about when and where and how you deploy the military, because you have heard the defense secretary say he wants, actual Marines or Army troops on our street. So again, I think this is posturing. I think that it is a completely unnecessary show of force in a city that is peaceful.
Mayor Bass, we've all seen this ramp up with attacks on California in general, going after our, air quality, our standards, our way of life, personal attacks, and also implications about the city of Los Angeles. The question is, are you in touch with the governor? What is that conversation like? Because it does feel like we are being targeted as a city and as a state by this administration.
Well, first of all, absolutely. I'm in regular conversation with the governor, but I've also been in regular conversation with the administration too. And so, ironically, as I mentioned, we're ahead in the recovery rebuilding because of resources they sent. And so now you have, the exact opposite happening. I think it's important that we keep all channels of communication open. We have to.
Mayor, I know you got a tight schedule. One last question, if we can. What is your sense, since you've referenced it a couple of times now, as mayor of our city, our chief executive, how do you deal with an administration that is so politically schizophrenic? One day they seem to work with you, the next day they try to humiliate and embarrass you.
Well, Tavis, I think our entire country is going through this, and it is basically a movie that is being created as we go through this journey. I don't know of anybody that's sure exactly how to work with the administration. What I do know is important is keeping channels of communication open and not closing those off, because that will get us absolutely nowhere. But I think even, the challenge with the last administration was there were people in the administration who believed in the mission, but were concerned about the erratic behavior in terms of passing and implementing policies.
And finally, your message to all Angelenos in this dark night.
My message to Angelenos is that we are going to stand together as a city. It is my job to make sure that Angelenos feel safe, all Angelenos, regardless of where you came from or when you got here. And that it is important that people exercise their constitutional right to protest, but they absolutely must do it peacefully, or I am concerned about the federal role intervening in our city.
On behalf of Dominique, Nicolai, and the entire KBLA delegation, Mayor Bass, thank you for always taking our phone call and coming on to explain these important issues when we need you. We wish you nothing but the best. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me go from Mayor Bass to Dr. Cornel West, our colleague here, and obviously Dr. West's been around a while. This is not his first rodeo. He has seen this kind of encroachment, this kind of paramilitary activity, this kind of disenfranchising of people of color. Dr. West, how are you today, sir?
My dear brother, how you doing there, man? You always on the case, even on the Sabbath, even on Sunday, brother.
Brother, we just trying to do our part here. I'm joined in studio by my colleagues Dominique DePrima and Dr. Nicolai Corte. Let me just start with a broad question, and we'll go from there. Tell me what you have seen. We've all been watching this, but tell me through your particular eyes and through your prism, what are you seeing happening on the ground here in your beloved state of California, specifically in the city of Los Angeles?
Los Angeles, yeah, brother, we are seeing the intensification of the gangsterization of the country. We've been talking about the Trump administration and escalating the gangsterization, escalating the thugification. And what I mean by that is doing anything they can do to get away with it with no attempt to listen to others, not in any way acting as if they're accountable, answerable, and responsible. So in one sense, we're not surprised by evil, nor are we paralyzed by despair, but we got to keep track of these waves of gangsterization taking place, my brother.
You've called Trump a gangster for a long time now. Years ago, I caught hell for calling him an irascible, unrepentant racial arsonist. They came after me for calling him that. They've come after you repeatedly for calling him a gangster. Tell me why you started using that word to define him when you did, and what you make of the fact now that everybody's in agreement with you that he's a gangster.
Well, I try to tell the truth, brother. You know what I mean? You're just trying to tell the truth. And, of course, all of us grew up with gangsters. All of us got gangster proclivities ourselves that we wrestle with every day, but we're just telling the truth. He's been a gangster for 45 years. He's just now in the White House. He used to be in the Trump house, but he's not going to be in the White House forever. As my dear brother Mark Lee Thomas reminds us, Trump ain't God, and American fascism is not almighty. No matter how mighty they think it is, it's going to come and go. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to keep swinging, and we're going to try to de-gangsterize America. That's the history of black people. That's what the black freedom struggle is, de-gangsterizing the country.
Dr. Cornel West, I know that you're on the national board of Black Lives Matter Grassroots. They're having an emergency organizing meeting today, actually at 7 at Center for Black Power in Leimert Park. The question of our leadership as black people, our moral leadership of a movement, even if it doesn't appear to directly target us, most of us are not, there are some, but most of us are not migrants. It continues to be debated. What would you add to that conversation right now?
I would say that we got to have the highest standards, my sister Dominique, just like your magnificent father, Amiri Baraka, who never sold out, who always told the truth, was willing to put his body on the line because he loved black people, just like you, just like Travis, just like Quarterly. We got to have love warriors, freedom fighters, wounded healers, and joy spreaders at this moment that is so bleak and so grim. We can't allow people to be overwhelmed by despair. We got to push it back, just like the blues. And that's what we need in our leadership. The problem is that most of our leadership is milquetoast and mediocre. That's just part of the problem. That's a larger each of they running scared. They trying to fit in. They trying to be well adjusted to injustice and well adapted to indifference so they can keep their professional status and be invited to the right kind of parties. No, that's the kind of leadership we don't need. We got to have truth tellers.
Speaking of leadership, particularly moral leadership, Dr. West, I want to ask you, what's your message to some of the educators, some of our fellow educators out there that are grappling with how to respond to this moment. There are some viral videos that so many of us saw this weekend of young people, fourth graders, ninth graders, or 9-year-olds that were subjected to these ICE raids, subjected to watching their parents and their family members detained by ICE agents. We all know how traumatizing that can be for anybody, especially children. And so what's your message to educators out there and folks willing to stand in the gap when it comes to the moral leadership that this moment is summoning?
Yeah, I mean, one, we just point out the barbarity and bestiality of this kind of treatment of young folk. But as you all recall, we had precious young black folk who were there on slave auctions being sold. They're witnessing the lynching. Well, here we go again, but this time you got National Guard engaging in this kind of gangsterizing of young people. The role of educators, as the great Carter G. Woodson said, is to tell the truth, expose the lies, bear witness to the truth in love, and do it in such a way that the powers that be have to take notice.
It is fascinating for me, Doc, and maybe fascinating is the wrong word. I shouldn't be so fascinated by it, but I am just undone by the silence of national leaders in Washington. They're watching what the president is doing. Certainly the GOP has had nothing to say about this. We mentioned earlier in this first hour of this live 3-hour special, we're on until 12 noon Pacific time trying to wrestle with what's happening in L.A. But we know that the Trump administration has lamented for quite some time now that they weren't around when George Floyd was murdered, 5 years ago to implement the kind of paramilitary operation they would have wanted to handle at that time. So they think that the Democratic leaders in the state of Minnesota failed then, and so now they're bashing Karen Bass, bashing Gavin Newsom. They've threatened literally publicly to arrest them if they get in the way. Essentially, they're going to show us. That's their attitude. We're going to show y'all how this should have been handled in Minneapolis 5 years ago. But it's one thing for the administration to say that. It's another thing for leaders in Washington writ large, certainly on the right, to be so silent in the face of this kind of authoritarianism. You say what about that, sir?
I say that, brother, you can't have an anti-fascist movement if you don't have people willing to fight for fascism in all places. And that means elected officials. That means Congress. That means whatever party you're on, whatever Republican, Democratic, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever it is, if you're independent. This is a matter of integrity, honesty, and decency, telling the truth, and standing up for folk who are being gangsterized in an unfair and an unjust manner. And it's a test of the country. I mean, part of the spiritual decay of the country is you just don't have enough folk with backbone. You got too much spinelessness out there, thinking that they can gain access to some kind of material goods rather than moral goods, and being willing to serve and fight for the moral goods. That's part of the spiritual crisis. But right now, we just need all of the freedom fighters we can get, though, man. And it takes different forms. You all are doing exactly what you're doing as truth tellers and freedom fighters, but you're going to have other forms of it as well, because you can't just continually gangsterize the people and don't say they ain't going to fight back.
That's right. That's right.
Dr. West, what is the role of the church in this moment? I mean, certainly that's been part of the sanctuary state or sanctuary city conversation, is churches sheltering people, and many migrants are pillars of our community churches.
Well, I mean, so many of the Christian churches have given up on the gospel in any deep, substantive way. You know, they've opted for money and prosperity rather than the deep blood at the cross and the willingness to deny themselves and pick up the cross. Now, you got some prophetic pastors out there. Stanley Tolbert, I just saw him in Texas 2 days ago. He's working very closely with our dear sister Melina as well. God bless Melina, Abdullah, and my brothers and sisters there at Black Lives Matter, grassroots. But the churches, you know, they've been asleep for so long that it's a sad thing. But they can wake up, but we don't have enough of them waking up. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Doc, I thank you for your insights as always. We'll be, of course, tuning into your program tomorrow and throughout the week. I know that he and Nina Turner will have their own say about this. It's one of the blessings of being here at KBLA Talk 1580. We've got some brilliant minds around this place who opine every day on the things that matter to our community. None greater than the Du Bois of our time, Dr. Cornel West. Love you, Doc. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Love you all. Stay strong now.
Appreciate you. We are pressing toward the top of the hour when we're going to be joined by the city attorney, Hydee Feldstein Soto. I think just after the top of the hour, after we talked to her, Isaac Bryan, assembly member, is calling in. I just got a note from Sheriff Luna. He is actually out in the street right now, as you can imagine. He's asked if we can take his call about 10:30. I told you 9:45. I didn't lie to you. The sheriff just pushed that back to about 10:30, so we expect to hear from our L.A. County Sheriff at 10:30. But it's fascinating, Dominique and Nicorlai, to be in this conversation. I would use the word surreal. Because I can't find anything better than that in this moment. But here we are, live on the radio talking about National Guard troops in the city of L.A., the President of the United States forcing this down our throats. You heard the mayor say we don't need it. The city is peaceful. There is no unrest. What ultimately is this all about, to your mind, Dominique?
Well, to my mind, this is about just fulfilling their agenda. And if you look at the fact that actually there were more migrants being detained under the Biden administration than currently under the Trump administration, they're panicking. They're not getting the numbers that they promised, and they're not arresting the people that they promised. They're detaining kids and workers at restaurants and factories. And so, meanwhile, I was pondering this last night, Tavis. If you're really worried about criminal drug cartels in California, wouldn't you be looking at some of the illegal cannabis grows or the human trafficking, where we actually do see the footprints of drug cartels or cartel criminal organizations from south of the border? Not at elementary schools, not at Italian restaurants in San Diego. And so I think it's part of their imaging to make it seem like they're delivering to their base what they promised, when in fact that is not possible, because it's based on the lie that there were millions of criminal so-called aliens running around everywhere. Most of the people with criminal records had already been arrested or deported. I do want to point out, though, Tavis and Dr. Nicorlai Corte, this is not over. A protest is planned by City Hall today at 2 o'clock. Tomorrow we'll see the hearing in court for Mr. Huerta of the SEIU, and we are expecting labor leaders from all over the state and possibly national labor leaders to show up in solidarity. That means organized labor is ramping up their response, and so that feels like a big escalation.
How big do you think this can get? And I asked that because we talked to Connie Rice earlier in this hour. For those who may have just tuned in, you missed an amazing conversation with Connie Rice. We had the mayor on earlier this hour, Melina Abdullah on earlier in this hour, Cornel West on earlier in this hour, and we're just in hour one. I'm grateful for all these persons who are calling in and coming in. But how expansive do you think this might get? You heard Connie say earlier, Dominique, that if you get 20% of the population, it's going to require a robust response. They can't arrest all of us. They can't shoot all of us. They can't kill all of us. It's going to require a robust response. How robust, then, do you think this can get, given the way this thing continues to escalate?
I think it's going to get very robust, because I do believe that courage is contagious, just like fear is. And we're moving more toward the courage side because, as you say, it's so surreal. Because, as Attorney Connie Rice said, we've moved so far beyond norms of our Constitution, our rule of law, that more and more people are reacting. I've been surprised to see people blocking ICE vehicles. Even the reaction in San Diego, where community members were surrounding vehicles after they detained some folks at an Italian restaurant. And when children are being really terrorized in schools.
I would ask this question of Nicorlai, but he's not a mother, and neither am I. You happen to be. How do you process their putting upon the babies? Going after the precious babies.
It's very stressful.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's especially when you couple that with attacks on, black people that we've traditionally seen, and this sort of unleashing, as our president said, of law enforcement on our black children. What does that mean for black students and children? And then I think about LGBTQ plus and the trans community under attack. And as a mama, you just want to take all the babies and hide them or protect them, but we can't do that. And that's why it feels like this is going to get very big, Tavis, because mamas are not going to put up with that, and mamas are not going to watch other mothers' children be subjected to this, regardless of their immigration status. So,
Nicola, how are you? I see Adrian Shropshire is here, the founder of the Black Pack, and our colleague here at KBLA Talk 1580. We'll get her in here at the top of the hour. But aside from covering this as an analyst, as our White House correspondent, as the host of your own show, how are you processing this just as a human being, as a Californian, Nicola?
Well, it's heartbreaking. I mean, this is my home state, as you point out, and one of the things that hurts the most is seeing, ordinary people who are just trying to go to work, make ends meet, that are just dropping off their kids, or in so many cases celebrating their kids' graduation from grade school. Yeah. I can't imagine the level of trauma that families are experiencing here, that our community is experiencing here. That is absolutely heartbreaking to me, but I am encouraged by the demonstrations of courage, to Dominique's point, that we are seeing in social media clips, that we're seeing in news reports. I'm seeing real people standing in front of buses and vehicles that ICE is using to round up people and saying, not on my watch. Yeah. Not on my watch am I going to allow this to happen here. And so encourage seeing that. But make no mistake about it, this is so much about breaking the spirit of Angelenos and breaking the spirit of Californians and so many of our fellow Americans. It's about that. It's also about breaking the economy. Yeah. There's an estimated 10 million undocumented immigrants among us. What do you think all of this activity is going to do? It's not going to encourage people to show up at work. Yeah. Think about all the day laborers that we all know, you can find at a Home Depot, at a Lowe's, that are a part of our community.
You can't find them now.
Right?
So I was driving around a couple of days ago and just noticing as I was driving around the city, they're hiding. Yeah. They are not at Home Depot. They're not at Lowe's. They're not outside as they typically are looking for work. They're just not
I'd be hiding too. Yeah. And we're hearing reports now that they're not showing up to court, which is a big problem, which is one of the reasons why traditionally law enforcement has said in the city they don't cooperate with federal authorities because we don't want to suppress witnesses and other members of our community from participating in the legal system because they're afraid they'll be turned over to immigration.
So much of this seems to me, Nicola, just to be about fear. Yeah. It's if you can scare people. Yeah. If you can, fear has a way of freezing people. Yeah. And I just think so much of this is just, it's a fear campaign.
And creating this sense of inevitability. This is what we see time and time again from this administration. As long as they can keep us thinking that, well, it's inevitable that the president's going to have his way, then folks, sort of, fall back and fall in line. I just want to point out, something that the mayor said in our conversation that stood out to me. She mentioned the LA wildfire recovery and working with the administration, advancing that recovery. The subtext, and the mayor didn't say this explicitly, but what came off to me, to what extent can the governor, can the mayor push back against this administration without this administration somehow, some way scuttling the very much needed resources needed to recover from the LA wildfires? We already know that a lot of the day laborers, they're going to be a part of that effort, may not be showing up to work on site related to the recovery.
I don't think you can. And my sense is that Donald Trump has an antipathy toward the state of California that we can't even describe. I don't mean to get political. I don't want to get us off topic. Dominique and I disagree about this, and that's okay. We don't have to always agree. That's my fear, and you wrote a book about Kamala Harris. Yeah. That's my fear. I have no disrespect to Kamala Harris, but my fear is if the president is threatening to arrest Gavin Newsom, if he's threatening to arrest Karen Bass, do you know what happened if Kamala Harris were governor right now? I mean, so the antipathy is already there, and I'm not stuck on stupid. I'm not naive. He would hate us anyway, no matter who the governor is.
Right.
I get that.
That was my
That's
point.
Dominique's point, and I get that. but I'm saying he'd really act a fool if she were the governor. And I'm not suggesting that she shouldn't run and you shouldn't vote for her. That's not my point. I'm just saying that the hatred, the guttural, visceral hatred that he has for the state of California is on display in a variety of ways. It's on display as we speak right now. It's going to get worse before it gets better, if it ever gets better, and it ain't going to get better. I digress for now. We're pushing toward the second hour of this 3-hour live conversation as Donald Trump has sent National Guard troops to the city of L.A., a city that is peaceful at the moment, and yet he's sending troops anyway, as you heard Mayor Bass say earlier in this hour. When we come forward, we'll talk to Hydee Feldstein Soto, the city attorney. We'll talk to Assemblyman Isaac Bryan and others. We'll talk to the sheriff in this next hour. We'll be joined by our colleague Adrian Shropshire. You're listening, and I'm glad about it, to KBLA Talk 1580.